with... Okay, we've got 13 weeks. The first one is today. Obviously, I'm going to talk about definitions of giftedness and understanding intelligence. Now, for those of you who, presumably all of you have done undergrads in psychology, so it's just going to be a refresher on the different ways of measuring intelligence. We're going to look at identifying gifted children and the complexities that there are within that. We're also going to cover programme planning. Now, how many of you are teachers? I had one teacher last time. This is more to do with planning an actual programme for gifted children, which might not actually be applicable to you guys. So we'll discuss that next week. We're going to look at characteristics of gifted children and look at teachers, if you spell it correctly, of gifted children. Do teachers have to be gifted themselves if they're teaching gifted children? We'll talk about that in the seminar. Now, I have got 3 online courses, online lectures this term. The university is really having a drive to put things online, okay? So that is the way this course is going to run. You either like it or you don't like it. You're used to it or you're not. But that's the way the university wants it to go. So that's what I am doing. We're then going to have a whole seminar on curriculum models. So you're going to get really involved in that and working in groups. We're then going to do 2 really fascinating weeks on creativity. Okay, and I'm going to get you guys to do an awful lot of group work, thinking about creative ideas, thinking outside the box, and how when you work with children or in your everyday life, you can think far more creatively, because that is a real buzz at the moment. We're then going to look at underachievement in these children, which unfortunately is profound. We're going to look at the culture differences and gender differences, and they are 3 different videos, hopefully, that I'll get to do online. I haven't actually done those yet. We're going to look at parenting and counselling gifted children, and then you're going to have some time to do your group projects in class. We are going to look at twice as exceptional children. Now, for those of you who did the course last time, it's a lap over, I'm afraid. So you've already done the lecture. I presented it live to you. For those of you who didn't see me, it's online. Okay. We're then going to do 2 weeks of group presentations, and then we're going to have our final exam. Now, this is nothing to worry about. It's open book. It will last an hour. And it's nothing tricky, okay? All the information is within the lecture notes. How many of you bought the book? You bought the book. Have you read it? It is very American, yeah? So I don't know who suggested this book. It's interesting if you are going to be a teacher of gifted children, and it's got some fascinating information in there. But if you haven't bought it, I mean, it will help, obviously, but if you haven't bought it, it is not particularly a massive problem, okay? There's a lot of the exam will be based on the lectures and on the readings as well. Okay, so on to your assessments. You're going to do an individual essay, which is worth 30%. Seminar participation, a lot like last time, it will go on your replies, whether you turn up for lectures, whether you participate. You're then going to do, because this is applied psychology, I then want you to work as a group and actually come up with something quite practical, and we're going to talk about this more when we do our creative lectures. I want you to come up with a leaflet that either tells teachers or either tells parents something about gifted children. Okay, so it's actually really applicable and on the more practical side. And then your exam is worth 20%. So your individual booklet is going to be on something about what does it mean to be gifted. Okay, this is all up there. Could be on something like gifted and gay. Could be on depression and suicide. Something really practical for parents or for teachers. Okay, and I want you to get to grips with those. The essay that I want you to do, these are the questions. You can choose whatever question you want to do. It can be the same kind of area as your project. It's totally up to you. Now we're going to start this week with actually comparing Renzulli, Gardner and Sternberg anyway. So a lot of that will be done in the class. If that's something you're interested in and want to delve into, you can then look at that as your essay. We're going to look at all of these the coming week. So you're actually going to do your seminar on the curriculum models. So that will give you an in-depth idea on those, and also all of the other things we're going to go through. Underachievement is one of the lectures. Counselling is one of the last ones. So if you're interested in that, you've got to be very quick at typing, because that only gives you like a week or two to get those done. And then parents, okay, need of overexcitabilities, and we talked about that when we talked about 2E children last semester. So there's a lot of recap that's going to go on. It's not going to be as though you're going to be given this essay and you don't know what it's going to be on. So think about what you're interested in as the time goes on, and then use what you've learnt in the lectures within your essay writing. So, gifted education means different things to different people. It means different things within different countries, between different countries. The United States has many definitions of what gifted education is, okay? Hong Kong has its own definition, and also the United Kingdom has a different definition again. So it's not an easy concept to grasp within what gifted education is. There's not one gold standard definition. But around the world, there are tens of thousands of children sitting in their classrooms who have not been identified as gifted. And these children are unrecognised. Their needs are not being met, okay? Some of them are bored stiff, others are sat there waiting for their peers to catch up, and quite honestly that is never going to happen. Some of them feign illness because they don't want to be at school. You know, they'd rather be doing something else. Is this fair? Okay. Some of them are really lucky in the fact that their parents identify them as having a talent. And hopefully those parents have got the money and have got the motivation to buy them that piece of equipment that they need, be that a gymnastic beam, be that a stethoscope, or be that a microscope if they want to be a scientist. Some parents can afford to take their children to enrichment classes and send them to piano lessons and send them to gymnastics lessons. And they are the fortunate ones. There are a lot of children whose parents can't afford that, or for those who don't identify that. So there are a lot of gifted children out there who are not being identified, and their needs are not being met. So today we're going to go through why we need gifted education. Why we need gifted education. We're going to go through the history of gifted education and also within Hong Kong. We're going to look at the definitions, the differences between the UK and the sort of history of the definitions, how they've changed and how it's still changing. We're going to look at intelligence, and we're going to look at gifted and intelligence. We're going to look at the concepts of giftedness, the different models that there are within giftedness, and we're going to do a little bit of a practical on that. We're going to look at emotional quotient as well as intelligent quotient. We're going to look at the controversies, and then we're going to finish up looking at the world is changing. We need individuals to solve problems such as poverty. We need the next generation to come up with new ideas. We need the next Steve Jobs. How are we going to motivate these students to be as good as they can be, because we need them for our changing world. So this is a quote by John F. Kennedy, one of the old US presidents. Not every child has an equal talent or an equal ability or an equal motivation. But children have an equal right to develop their talents, their abilities and their motivations. Now this is quite a simple quote, but boy is it controversial. It's controversial because of cultural differences, funding differences, differences in opinion. These children who are gifted already have everything, some people think. Why should they be given more? So something as simple as this can sort of generate a whole field of different questions. In reality, if anybody was running the marathon to a professional level, if anybody's in the Olympics, they have trainers to help them with their particular skill. Academically gifted children also need well-trained teachers who understand them, need to know their challenges and to develop their academic talents. Okay, so we're going to spend some time next week talking about teachers and whether they need to be gifted or not. But in reality, many teachers are unfamiliar with the needs of gifted children, and parents are unfamiliar with the needs of their own children. And you guys, as going into professionals, a lot of professionals don't understand the needs of gifted children. So we're going to talk a lot about that. Now, we don't know for sure. As you can imagine, getting reliable, getting valid data on this is problematic. And we're going to talk about identifying students next week. Many reports indicate that between 3 and 5% of the population are gifted. However, others believe this figure is an awful lot higher because we don't identify them. There are a lot of children who are misdiagnosed. So the reliable statistic is 3 to 5%. Whether that's true or not, we don't know. So the rationale for gifted education: children who are not challenged are cheated. This is really simple. And you would have thought, yeah, actually I believe that's true. But as I said, funding issues, attitudes, cultures, lack of knowledge makes this a huge topic. So society's reactions. I think I'm safe in saying that the Western view the argument for educating children who are gifted differently is elitist. The view in the Western culture is that they can make it on their own. Why do these children need extra help? Okay. The money that we need for this special education, where's it going to come from? The government? The government doesn't have any money, so who's going to fund it? And many teachers actually feel that students should adjust to the curriculum. Why should they have to differentiate within their classroom? Why should they have to have the burden of doing something different? Why can't we just teach the same thing to everybody? So there's a lot of controversy within society. And research does suggest that there are very big differences in perceptions of gifted education within the West and within sort of China, Hong Kong and the Eastern countries. Has anybody read Battle Hymn of the Tiger Mother? No, somebody did quote it in their essay, but it might not have been from you guys. It is a fascinating book. Now, when I first came to live in Asia, I went to live in Singapore, and I lived there for a long time. And this is a book about a mother and her 2 children who are from China, but she brought them up in the United States of America, in the thick middle of the United States of America. And you can imagine the culture difference. And it's her story of the difference in education and the way that she wanted to bring her children up. One of her children, one of her child doesn't speak to her anymore, and the other one is a world famous concert pianist. So if you haven't read it, it's actually quite a fascinating insight into the differences in culture and education. Okay, so where there's been ongoing debate, certainly in the UK, certainly in the States, about whether gifted education is elitist, there just hasn't been this debate with you guys in China. Do you believe that? Do you think this is true? Blank faces. Okay? So it's quite an interesting concept, okay, that culture can play such a massive part in the education of these very special children. Don't worry, we're going to talk a lot about this later. So Hong Kong favours gifted education, apparently, according to the research, because it fits with your cultural heritage. It fits with the idea of the aspirations of individuals. Whereas in the UK, it is an elitist thing to go to a different type of school. Okay, so it's very interesting. We'll talk about your tiered schooling at the end of this lecture. So the rationale for gifted education. Those who do believe in gifted education children who demonstrate exceptional strength should have a curriculum that meet their needs. This is the argument for gifted education. Just like I said earlier about we need individuals who are socially, intellectually, economically, cultural, and those who are going to be political leaders. We need these children to think differently and to see things differently. We need the medical researchers, the artists, the writers, innovation, to get rid of all sorts of different diseases, the pollution issues. And we need to rely on these children, so we need to motivate them and we need to educate them. So really and truly, their development can't be left to chance. And there's a lot of research out there that's saying that we need to foster these children. We need to look after these children. So the history of gifted education, the idea that everybody is different has been around for years, and the idea that some people have more intelligence than others has been around for years. We need to encourage this. Plato encouraged it years and years ago with men and women, interestingly. Okay, men and women. Apparently the Tang dynasty, child prodigies were summoned to the imperial court for specialised education. Okay. And the good old Renaissance as well, after all the horrible dying and death and of the black of the plague and all the dark ages, came sort of the rebirth, the Renaissance, the rebirth, with money from the churches, really, that provided an idea that we need artists, we need musicians, and we want these individuals who were gifted to be a part of this. So artists like Michelangelo, Galileo, mathematicians were allowed to go off and do their thing and be the person that they could be, the genius in themselves. And obviously this was a time of great philosophers like Machiavelli. So even up to the 1970s within Hong Kong, we were still doing this general basic education for all. It wasn't until the 1980s that really sort of started making these first tentative steps in the formation of gifted education. So not until the 1980s. And this obviously attracted the attention of parents, of teachers, of the wider community. And it really started with, if we're going to give children with special educational needs money and special classes, then we need the enrichment programs for children who have gifts, for children who have talents. And this came from the Education and Manpower Bureau. Okay, so we're going to talk a little bit now about definitions of gifted education. And as I said, it differs around the world. Everyone has their own idea about what gifted education is. And this is because there's no one idea of what giftedness is. Is it a gift? Is it a innate ability? Is it a talent? Are we talking about highly gifted children? Are we talking about extremely gifted children? Are we talking about profoundly gifted children? Okay? Everybody calls them something different. Everybody has no one real term. Is it about innate abilities? Are you born with it? Or is it about sort of this potential? Are you born with a potential? So it's about how you're motivated. So there are different aspects of giftedness. So in the past, we've really looked at IQ scores. And if you got a certain score on an IQ test, you were gifted. And if you didn't quite make the mark, you weren't. Okay? But it's changed a lot since those days. Hong Kong has, since the 1990s, stuck with the USA on more of a broad definition of what giftedness is. And they use a multiple criteria for this. So you can have exceptional achievement or potentials, okay, so it's about potential, in one or more of the following 6 domains. A high level of measured intelligence is the first one. Now you need to remember these. A specific academic aptitude in a particular subject. Creative thinking. Okay, creative thinking is a gift and talent. If you're good at creative thinking, you're thought to be gifted. A superior talent in visual and performing arts. Natural leadership of peers. Now, when I first heard of this one, I was a bit confused. How is being a leader part of being gifted? I didn't understand it, and we'll talk about that in a second. And psychomotor ability, so sportsmanship. So if we take those by one, a level of measured intelligence. So this really is talking about IQ. Okay, you're good at reasoning, you're good at comprehending information, and you can manipulate abstract concepts. So we really are talking about a high level of IQ there. We're talking about an aptitude in a particular area. It doesn't have to be across the board. So you could be an amazing linguist. You could be an amazing mathematician or an engineer. You don't have to be gifted across the board in all academic disciplines. It can just be one. Now, creative thinking, and we are going to cover this in 2 lectures because it is incredibly important. It's about how you can take ideas, how you can turn them inside out, see things from a different view, and bring them together. And that is the future. So children who can see things in a different way are gifted. They also think it's another type of intelligence. It's quite interesting. Those who are in the visual and performing arts, painters, theatre, thespians, dancers, music, okay? Individuals who are good in any of these areas can be considered gifted. And leadership. Have you ever had a teacher, have you ever had a boss who really got the most out of you, who motivated you to do something really well that without them you wouldn't have been so good at? A boss who would make you work as a group and got the best out of your group. This is about leadership, okay? And these people are few and far between, but they're very good at motivating individuals, at challenging them at the right level to get the best out of you. And this is a lot to do with the EQ. And then, of course, outstanding performances in athletics, in sensory motor coordination, in mechanical skills. So you're very good with your hands. You might be an amazing football player, a table tennis player. Okay, so you've got the ability to see things and have that hand-eye coordination that other people don't. And of course, you can be gifted in one of these areas, or you can be gifted in multiple areas. Okay? You may not excel in all, but you have to excel in some. So you can see why the definition of giftedness is complex, and you can see now how identifying children is complex. Okay? It's not just an IQ test anymore. So the mission of gifted education really is to explore and develop the potential of these gifted children. So we're talking about nurturing multiple intelligences. So Hong Kong does have quite an interesting gifted education idea and paper. The needs are met within your own schools, predominantly, not necessarily within Tier 3 schools. And also schools should ensure that children are not just met academic needs, but also their social and emotional needs as well. Okay, so the Hong Kong government is recognising it's not just about the academics, that there also is a social and emotional side to gifted education that needs to be understood. Their needs are there to be met. So really all definitions lead to the idea that intelligence as well as achievement is matched, that matches older children. Okay, their intelligence, their achievement, these children are matching older children, not just their peer group, but 1, 2, even 3 years older than them. So their mental development outstrips their chronological age. Okay, you've had enough of me talking. Let's see if we can have a YouTube clip. Okay, sit back and relax. It's about 10 minutes.
Attention conflict with pictures and testing of that.
Probably ADD, maybe it's Asperger's. They were trying to find something that I must be.
They thought I was some kind of evil creature and hell child.
I just like math. It's something that I find exhilarating.
It's like a passion that's inside you and you just can't not dance.
I think I was 1.5 when I started to read.
I spent about 3 years just being nocturnal and not really doing much of anything.
They were trying to fix me rather than figure me out.
It's almost like falling down the rabbit hole. It's strange and it's wonderful and it's unique. There's lots of areas one can be gifted linguistically, mathematics, visual spatial capacity.
It didn't have a lot of properties. All it could do is math.
Alkali earth metals, they're also very reactive.
This, I'll make a quick trick second. I'll make a quick trick block second.
Now go over the 1950s.
And silicon and germanium are used in computer chips.
Open, bring your mouth this way. We'll find something you can say. Do, laugh, like, legs.
What we know for sure is the higher the abilities and the quote-unquote uniqueness, the more the child or the adult responds to stimuli. And stimuli stays with them longer.
I've got a whole bunch of these like books that are filled with science or history, stuff like that, just because I find that more interesting than everything else.
I know I was inquisitive, and I didn't seem so much inclined to go out and play as and say and then read a book.
It's really fun for me to learn something like Italian or like math. So I want to do it, and it's as simple as that.
What they are is they're very neurologically atypical children. So their experience, their perception, their way of processing is uncommon and extraordinary.
I've always been good at numbers since I was like 1. I really
Precocious little so-and-so.
Some gifted kids are omnibus. They manifest as gifted right across the board. Other gifted kids may manifest or show to us gifts in certain areas and may be weaker in other areas.
There's this, chaos, this car crash and blender going on up here that has to come out the end of the pen, and it won't focus.
There's 2 diagnoses that are on the uprise, and one is bipolar disorder, and another diagnosis that has really been on the upswing for a whole lot of reasons, medical and social and political, is anything on the autism spectrum.
They were just picking things that they could try to match up my qualities with, and so I saw like 4 different psychologists try to figure it out.
Giftedness is no longer funded in many states in the U.S., and in British Columbia there's no longer special funding for giftedness. So parents will actually be somewhat okay with another kind of diagnosis if it means that child will get the kinds of supports they need.
In grade 4, I sort of started earlier. I was getting these really bad stomach aches. I was starting to miss school, for a week at a time and a month at a time.
It's a struggle. And a lot of teachers think that, this is the bright kid, they're just going to be fine on their own, and there's really a lot going on.
This kid has a problem. Something is wrong with him. We don't know what to do with him.
There's like nothing to diagnose. It's really unique things.
So here is this meditation.
One of the adages in our field is once is a pattern. Often a highly profoundly gifted person will anticipate a pattern or just see it once and then quickly begin to extrapolate.
Seeing patterns in the soccer field is like breathing. It's just, I can see what's going to happen in like 3 minutes.
So the teachers out there, and they're doing what good teachers do, they give a baseline generalization, several examples, and you see the gifted kid just starting to nod off.
I can remember for the past 4 years, we've done electricity, and they're saying the same thing over and over again.
We have this information already. It is not necessary to repeat.
I haven't done this stuff 2 years ago, and I was like, okay, this is really easy. I need to do something different. I was getting really bored.
I sort of don't really pay attention to if it's not something that I'm interested in, but if it's something I'm interested in, somehow I just hear it, even if I'm reading a book and I'm not really paying attention.
So when you're doing review of curriculum in September and October, the gifted kid has checked out, and then he begins to lose faith that the leaders, the educators, the administrators, have any idea at all about how to teach, because clearly they're missing about how this particular mind needs to work.
I like to learn about things, but I like to learn my way.
Lord, I think it's what other way is going to solve this problem?
Some kids really demonstrate they do get it and are met oftentimes with misunderstanding, or teachers who no longer kind of are comfortable with it. What do you do with a child who might even be more intelligent than you in some areas?
My grade 7 teacher didn't like me because he didn't know what to do with me.
My favorite subject in school is going home.
That's really, really sad, because this is a little child who's absolutely primed to learn. She reads at about a grade 10 level in kindergarten, and to write a story like that. The whole notion of what is up here. There were children here today who were age 4 or 5 and who are reading and comprehending at a grade 12 level. They get together and it's just instant. It's like, I can be free. I don't have to scream my thoughts.
It's fun because they actually somewhat understand me. Okay.
They can sort of understand most of what I'm saying, because some of the other people will just sit there and be like, okay, I heard you were saying a word, but what did you say?
To meet someone else that can function at their level is just a huge excitement.
You just fall in love with these incredible kids who, with their immense power, often have incredible vulnerability, and you just feel compelled to try and make a difference for them.
Sue sort of gave me my own perspective on what actually is going on. I couldn't program with a little computer. I had to, gain a self-awareness. And
Sort of place people around me that sort of created an environment where I guess I felt more comfortable.
Just having somebody be like, you're okay, like, it's okay to be who you are. I think that definitely saved me from going down some pretty scary paths.
They're highly motivated as a group of individuals to contribute and to make a difference, which runs sort of counter to what some people think about the egotistical genius.
I'm really interested in teaching, so if I can do that as well as continue to make art.
And eventually what I would like to end up doing is using my art to sort of communicate to people about nature and maybe help influence trends.
Try and solve humanity's problems, like you design a cure for cancer.
You can't lose this wonderful aspect of humanity that just wants to contribute and to make a difference. Like, it really needs to matter to all of us.
I want to do it all, right? There's so much stuff to do. It's, the palette of human experience is so broad.
describe myself as a person who likes to think outside the box.
I've never expected myself to fit a norm or to be normal.
When I dance, I feel graceful and beautiful, and like because the movement is just so nice.
I'm really interested in things, like perhaps obsessively so, and that's okay with me.
There's a lot of talk of IQ scores and achievement, but that really doesn't get to the core of what being gifted is.
I'm happy with who I am today, even though it came about in a strange way.
Okay. So that just gave you a kind of overview of children describing their situation who have gifted and talented needs. A very diverse range of children with different abilities, different likes, different interests. And one even said that it's not about IQ. Okay, so it kind of gives you an idea into what they're like. Okay, now this isn't good practice now because I'm going to have another video. I was going to have a break in between. Does anybody need to just pop off for a minute, stretch their legs? Because we're going to go and do an overview of the understanding of intelligence. Now this should not be new to you, okay? You've all done your undergrad, but it might have been a while before, since you did your first year undergrad, and you might have just, you know, forgotten a little bit. So we're going to go and just review what intelligence is, how we measure it, okay, and the different forms there are of intelligence and how it's changed over the years. Now this is a good sort of 10, maybe 13-minute video, so hang tight, sit back and enjoy.
Intelligence. Now we know from our lecture that human beings think in very different ways and that we rarely reflect on how we think. We know that thinking and intelligence are related and intertwined, but not the same thing. And we know that there are different ways of thinking. But we need to understand the different types of thinking, convergent and divergent thinking, which we've talked about in the lecture. Now we're going to move on to intelligence.
We will talk about divergent thinking later.
Is both the idea of assimilation of knowledge as well as the ability to apply knowledge. Intelligence is incredibly hard to define. It's often defined as the ability to learn from experience, to solve problems, and to use knowledge to adapt to new situations. But you cannot think of intelligence as a thing. It is an abstract concept.
Smarty pants, great. You've heard terms like these before. Maybe you've even been on the receiving end of one of them. But actually, defining intelligence is a lot trickier than just coming up with new names for smart people. I mean, intelligence isn't like height or weight. You can't just toss them on a scale and give an exact measurement. It has different meanings for different cultures, techniques, and skills.
You hear that?
So what is intelligence? It's a question that doesn't give us a lot of answers, but it does open up a bunch of other equally important and interesting questions, like what influences it, and how can it be assessed? Is it a single general ability, or does it cover a range of aptitudes and skills and talents? How do things like creativity and innovation factor in? Genetics, environment, education. And what about emotional intelligence? Most agree that it's best to think of intelligence not as a concrete thing so much as a concept. The ability to learn from experience, to solve problems, and use knowledge to adapt new experiences. We've often used intelligence tests to assess mental aptitude, but these tests have a long, complex, and dark history. I mean, there are Nazis involved, so yeah. So as you'll see, there are reasons that intelligence is one of the most hotly debated subjects in psychology. It's complicated and controversial.
There Okay, so let's look at the rise of IQ tests. Alfred Binet was a French psychologist, and he was actually sent into schools to identify children who were struggling academically. But he noticed that in the classroom, the responses he was getting from what he called dull children resembled those of ordinary children but of a younger age. He also identified bright children, on the other hand, responding like children of older ages. Now, he identified what we want to measure now as sort of a child's mental age or level of intellectual development relative to that of other children. So he began measuring IQ, intelligent quotient, as mental age divided by chronological age times by 100. Now, IQ scores are computed from tables based on established norms and standardised intelligence tests, and we will get back to this in a moment. So Thulston in 1946 rejected this idea of this one general intelligence factor of intelligence and instead presented his own theory. His theory states that human intelligence includes 7 primary mental abilities, and through these abilities appear to be different, they're related to each other. And these are spatial abilities, perceptual abilities, numerical abilities, verbal comprehension, word fluency, memory, and reasoning. Now, if you are good with numbers, it means that you can be good with numbers and not necessarily also be good with words. Howard Gardner went one step further than this and viewed intelligence from a different perspective, and intelligence comes in different forms. He believed in multiple intelligences. And he believed that looking at brain-damaged individuals, you could see that some abilities could be damaged, but actually others could still be quite intact. And he proposed this multiple intelligences. So you could be good at linguistics, logical, mathematical intelligence. You could be good at music and have a musical intelligence. This bodily kinesthetic intelligence, you could be good at sport. You could have a visual spatial intelligence. You could have an interpersonal intelligence and an interpersonal intelligence. But also you could have a naturalistic intelligence. So lots of very different ideas on what intelligences are. And actually there's some good evidence that suggests that we do have these multiple intelligences. If you look at the existence of these savants, these prodigies and other exceptional individuals, these do support Gardner's theory that you can be good in one area, but not necessarily good in all areas. Following on from this, Howard Sternberg actually proposed 3 different types of intelligence in his triadic theory of intelligence. He proposed that there's an analytical intelligence, which is all about academic problem solving. He believed in a creative intelligence, which is reacting to new situations and new ideas. He also believed in practical intelligence, in which you could be good at everyday tasks. You could have common sense, and this was actually an intelligence. So we're talking about prior knowledge, novelty with problems, and adaptation to the environment. But along with specific intelligences, there are different types of intelligences. We could have social intelligence and emotional intelligence. Social intelligence is all about the know-how involved in comprehending social situations and managing yourself successfully. Whereas emotional intelligence is about the ability to perceive, to understand, to manage and to use emotions. Now, sometimes very intelligent people have a hard time processing social information. Now, just look at your professors for that one. But can you see emotion in faces? Can you see emotion in music and in films? Can you predict emotions? And can you appropriately express yourself in the right way, in the right situation? Do you have emotional intelligence? Okay, so moving on, how do we measure intelligence? Now, we looked earlier at Alfred Binet. He was the first person to look at measuring intelligence and created the intelligence test that could be measured looking at mental age of children in schools. So mental age divided by chronological age times by 100 equals the IQ. This is very basic and actually has been moved forward and revised by work from Louis Terman, who identified the Stanford Binet intelligence test. And this is actually still used today. We also have David Welshker, who created the most widely used intelligence test, which is the Whisk and the Weiss, and I'm sure you might have come across these in your practice. Now, because of the work of Terman and Binet, we can actually see the standardisation of administering IQ and understanding IQ. So as a result of this test, we've established norms and standardisation. And this means that the tests were administered consistently to a large enough representative sample of the population that the range of scores resulted in this bell curve, this standard distribution. And this means that the manner of administrating and scoring and interpreting of results is consistent. So, norming involves giving a test to a large population, so data can be collected, and comparing groups, so such as age groups. The resulting data provides norms, okay, so we can reference it. We can look at interpreting future scores. Norms aren't expectations of what a given group should know, but a demonstration of what that group does know. Norming and standardising the test ensures that new scores are reliable. So if we look at the graph here, the average score on an IQ test is 100. Standard deviations describe how the data are dispersed in the population and give context to large data sets. So the bell curve uses the standard deviation to show how all scores are dispersed from the average score. In modern IQ testing, one standard deviation is 15 points. So a score of 85 will be described as one standard deviation below the mean. Any IQ score that falls within one standard deviation above or below the mean, so between 85 and 115, is considered average. An IQ score of 130 or above is considered a superior level. That's because of studies of twins and family members and adopted children do support the idea that there is a genetic contribution to intelligence. If we look at this graph here, children who are reared together have an intelligence of just about 0.3. If we look all the way over to the other side of the table, identical twins who are reared together, who obviously have 100% of the same genes, have 0.8% genetic overlap in their IQ. We also know that with age, genetic influences become more apparent. Studies show that adopted children's intelligence scores become more like their biological parents, and that identical twin similarities continue to increase as they get older. Still, it's hard to tell what percent of intelligence comes from genes to account for differences between individuals. In 1921, researchers began following more than 1,500 children with IQ scores in the top 1% of the distribution. Now, these boys and girls were nicknamed the Termites after Lewis Terman, who originally directed the research. Now, the Termites started out bright, physically healthy, sociable, and well-adjusted. As they entered adulthood, most became successful in the traditional way of the times. Bearing in mind this was a long time ago, men had careers and women stayed at home. However, some gifted males failed to live up to their early promise. They dropped out of school, they started drifting into low-level work. When the researchers compared the 100 most successful men in the Terman study with the 100 least successful, they found that the successful men were ambitious, they were socially active, and they had many interests. They also found that they had encouraging parents. The least successful drifted casually through life, but there was no difference in their levels of IQ between the two groups. So, this shows that motivation, hard work, and self-discipline are also important factors for success. So you guys, you better be motivated. Because if you look at this slide here, Duckworth and Silverman in 2005 identified that self-discipline accounted for more than twice as much of the variance in students' final grades and achievement test scores as IQ did. So be motivated and you can get a high score in your test.
Okay, so it's not just about IQ. So hopefully none of that was new to you. That should have just been a whistle-top recap on IQ and intelligence. Now, just remember a couple of those names because they might come up in your test at the end. Right, two very important people who you do need to remember. Write it down and take note. Leta Hollingworth. Really, she was the first woman, the first person that really looked at gifted children and was the first to identify that the home environment was really important in nurturing gifted education. And if you look at the reading that I've given you within this week's course, look at the environment, okay, the support of parents and the effect that has on the home environment and motivation for gifted children. She really identified that it was incredibly important to identify these children early, to get them grouping with children not of the same age, but of the same ability, okay? And she also made the important observation that children who have an IQ of 140 were wasting half their time in school. Children who had IQs of 170 were practically wasting all of it. There was just no point in them being at school. The teachers didn't know what to do with them. The teachers were threatened by their intelligence. Okay? So she was really one of the first people to identify that the home environment played a huge role. And she set up a school for bright children in the United States. And she made it that the teacher was there, but really it was the students who were providing the course of where they wanted their education to go. And we'll talk about, she wasn't looking at acceleration, and we'll talk about that later. She was more looking at enrichment, okay? So broadening their understanding of a particular topic, looking at the breadth of it. She wasn't making young children do their DSE or their degree, okay? She wasn't accelerating them up. She was really broadening their understanding by giving them an awful lot of opportunity to understand the curriculum in different ways by doing projects that they were interested in and they led. She also wanted to dispel the myth that bright children take care of themselves. She would direct them, she would direct the curriculum and help them with what they needed to learn, rather than letting them sit in a classroom just to get on and be themselves and to do what they wanted to do because they could, because they were bright, they could do it themselves. She wanted to dispel this myth that they could take care of themselves, and she wanted to give them a curriculum that would really help them in later life. Now, the other person who is incredibly important, who was the father of gifted education, was Louis Terman. Now, as you heard before, he was the one who took the idea of the Stanford Binet test and changed it from French, from Alfred Binet, into English. Now, he worked out of Stanford University, which is why it's called the Stanford Binet test. And what he did, which was really important, was he was looking for one thing, one aspect that could identify these children as being intelligent. But he didn't find it. He didn't find that one thing that looked at, oh, you're intelligent. Instead, he identified that it was all about children's ages and what was appropriate for that age. And he's the one who came up with really norming that standard distribution. So you could tell that the average IQ was 100 and those children who fell above and below the IQ scores. So he was the one who collected all this data to find the norms for this standard, for the distribution, the variance of IQ. So very important guy. And even today, his studies are used. He did lots of longitudinal studies with lots of different children all the way through. Even after his death, these studies have continued. He took high-functioning children and wanted to dispel the myths that gifted children were sickly, gifted children were mentally ill. He wanted to dispel the myth that this intelligent burnt out. Okay, so he looked at these children year after year and really compiled an awful lot of this data. And this is where we get these norms for our standard variation of IQ. So two very important individuals. Right, do you want another break or are you okay? Anybody need to wait? Okay, let's keep going then. Okay, another very short video on the smartest children in the world. These children have incredible IQ scores. Oh, hold on a minute.
Childhood and youth is supposed to be a time where you're not supposed to be that smart, and there's room to do stupid stuff. But the kids in this video didn't have that time because they were hitting the books and joining Mensa, the oldest and largest IQ society in the world. Here are some of the smartest kids in the world. Elise Tan Roberts. Born in December 2006, Elise Tan Roberts hails from Great Britain. When she was an infant, she showed great intelligence after having exceeded her motor skills and working beyond her appropriate age group. At the young age of 2 years and 4 months, she was tested and her IQ was 156, just 4 points lower than Einstein's. Elise was the youngest child to ever be inducted into Mensa. Sherwin Sarabi. Sherwin Sarabi is so smart that he started school 2 years early. When he blew away the academic content, he was tested by psychologists, and he tested off the scale and got the highest possible score of 160, which is believed to be the same score that Einstein would have had. He joined Mensa at the age of 3, and at 4 years old, his mental age tested out to 8 years old and 9 months. Before most kids could read, he had over 190 books under his belt by the age of 5. Alexis Martin. In February of 2014, at the age of 3 years old, Alexis Martin joined Mensa with an IQ score that exceeded 160, according to her father, which is higher than 99.9% of other 3-year-olds. She started reading at the age of 2 and was reading at a 5th grade level by the time she was 3. Alexis even taught herself Spanish with her iPad. Aprit J. Swal. By the time he was 10 months old, Aprit J. Swal was already walking and talking. By the time he was 2, he was reading and writing, and quoting Shakespeare by the time he was 5. Akrit has the highest IQ in the country of India with a score of 146, beating out nearly 1 billion people. He was performing surgery on people in his village by the time he was 7 years old. He gaining nationwide attention over his medical knowledge and skills.
Could you trust him?
At the age of 12, he started studying science at Chandigarh College, and he is the youngest student ever accepted by an Indian university. Saffron Pledger. Even though she was just 3 years old, Saffron Pledger was already adding, subtracting, reading, and writing, not to mention that she could already count to 50 despite not going to school. After being tested, she scored an IQ of 140, which was 40 points higher than the national average. Unsurprisingly, she became a member of Mensa, thus becoming one of the youngest to join after Elise Ann Roberts. Jacob Barnett. When Jacob Barnett was a young child, he was diagnosed with autism, and his mother was told that he wouldn't ever learn his ABCs, and to not even bother with alternative education methods. Luckily, Jacob's mother didn't listen, and it turned out that she had a child prodigy on her hands, as Jacob was accepted to college at the age of 11. Jacob started to work on his master's degree in physics at 15 at the Perimeter Institute of Theoretical Physics. At the age of 18, he started working on his doctoral program at the Perimeter Institute. Needless to say, the doctors who worked with Jacob when he was young were clearly quite wrong. Heidi Hankins. In 2012, 4-year-old Heidi Hankins was accepted into Mensa due to her IQ score of 159. Her parents first started to pick up on her smarts when she displayed a love for reading. Her father explained that he bought her the Oxford Reading Tree books when she was just 2 years old, and she read through the series in about an hour, which is usually something that's accomplished by a child of 7 years old. Not only is she smart, but at the age of 5, she started wowing the world with her amazing watercolor art. Trinity Prakash. At the age of 11, Trinity Prakash won the British television show Child Genius, where she competed in categories such as debating, logic, mental arithmetic, spelling, and general knowledge against 21 other finalists. Not only did she win Child Genius, but she was also the world Scrabble champion for the under 12 category. Also, she is a big fan of the BBC's business editor, Robert Peskin, and even penned a lengthy essay for his review. Colin Carlson. By the time he was 15 years old, Colin Carlson had already completed 2 bachelor degrees in 2012 at the University of Connecticut. In 2013, he got his master's degree. Usually at a time when teenagers are graduating high school, Colin was accepted into the PhD program at the University of California at Berkeley studying ecology. While an undergraduate, he was denied a chance to do a field study in South Africa due to his age, and filed a complaint against the university. Dylan Toe. Dylan Toe was making academic waves when he started solving some of the hardest math problems in the world. He started becoming bored in school and got approved from the Singaporean Ministry of Education to accelerate his education so he could get access to more challenging material. It was then that Dylan found Brilliant.org and got connected with mentors from universities. He is now studying robotics alongside his mathematics. Well, folks, that's our video. How good do you feel about yourself now? Yeah, me too. Well, anyway, click on these other videos.
Okay. So how do we all feel about ourselves after watching that? And the one thing is they all have an IQ over 140. Okay. So a lot of them are wasting their time at school, which is why they are accelerated and have so many different degrees. Okay, quick recap of what we've learnt before we go on to some theories. So only 3 to 5% of the population are gifted, but why might this not be valid and reliable? Anybody remember? Yeah, many are misdiagnosed. There's no one way, okay, to identify IQ. Okay, Western and Eastern ideas on sort of the rationale for gifted education differ. Can anybody remember why? Culture, okay, culture and aspirations. So remember that, okay, difference in culture. Okay, this is a very important one, and you need to know these 6 areas. Nudge, nudge, wink, wink. Anybody remember one of these areas off the top of their heads? Yes. Okay, creative thinking. Visual spatial arts. Psychomotor. Yeah, so IQ, intelligence. 2 more. Leadership. Yeah, 1 more. specific academic ability. Okay, so 6 of them. Okay, know them. And then Leta Hollingworth was famous for what? We've just done it. Yeah, okay. She built a school. She was passionate about how the home environment was important for these children. And she also suggested that IQ of 140, half of them shouldn't be in school, and 170, they all shouldn't be in school. And then lastly, why is Lewis Terman so important? He was the, father of gifted education. Okay, so remember that, he's the father of gifted education. All right, let's move on. What's the time? 8 o'clock. Okay, we're going to go and have a look at some concepts of gifted education, okay? And then we're going to take 3 of them and look at them in a little bit more detail if we've got time. Okay, so there's the C-star concept by Tannenbaum, the 3-ring model by Renzulli, the differentiated model of gifted and talented by Gagnes, and the multiple intelligences, which is Gardner, and the triarchate theory, which is Sternberg. Okay, so Tannenbaum really was the first guy who broadened the concept of giftedness. Originally, we were talking about IQ levels and the cutoff of IQ. He really made it a little bit wider and also enhanced the moral, the physical, the emotional, the social, as well as intellectual side of giftedness, okay? Now, he came up with this C-star model in the 1980s, okay, just when Hong Kong was bringing in the idea of gifted education. So it was all happening at the same time, okay, around the 1980s. And his model really did show, talk about potential of becoming a performer or a producer of ideas. It identified children who might grow into something. The only problem with his model was it was a little bit restrictive, and we'll come on to why. But it did show a holistic view. Okay. So if we look at the model, this is his C-star model, and you can see that it's all about these 5 elements. Now, you have to have all 5 of these elements in order to be classified as gifted, and that's why it's quite restricted. Okay, you need all of these elements. If you're strong in one and weak in the other, it doesn't really compensate, okay? And that was why it was a bit restrictive. So it's about general ability, that G factor that we've talked about. You have to have a special aptitude, so a natural ability in something that you're interested in. You've also got to have this non-intellectual requisite, which is just a motivation, okay? A motivation to want to participate in something, a drive, a dedication. You've also got to have an environment that supports what you want to do. You can't be the top table tennis player in the world if you don't have a table tennis table at home, okay? So you've got to have that environment, that the parental support, that culture, okay? And also, chance. Okay, you're never going to be the top table tennis player if you never get a chance to play it in the first place. Okay, so you've got to have all of these to be that genius. So it goes that each of those arms, as you saw before, some was static, and that was what the child was doing at that particular moment, and the other one was dynamic. Let's just go back and show you. So these are static, these are what the child is doing at the moment, whereas this dynamic thing here, this side, is what their potential is, what's changing from their learning, from their environment. Okay. It doesn't assign more value to one area than the other. As I said, you've got to have all of those components in the same proportion in order to be gifted and talented. Like Renzulli's model, it's about interaction, and we're going to talk about Renzulli's model in a minute. But it is problematic in the case that all of these elements have to be present at the same time in the same proportion. Okay. So that was Tannenbaum's C-star model. Now, little Renzulli, I love the name Renzulli, it's brilliant. It's all about a combination of 3 factors in order to become gifted, and these overlap. Creativity, which comes up a lot. This task commitment, which also comes up a lot. It's all about motivation, perseverance. And again, you've got to be good. You've got to have this above average ability. Okay? So it's the interaction of these 3 basic human clusters. But he does say that gifted behaviour is found in certain people, not all people, under certain circumstances, not all circumstances, and not all of the time. Okay? So you can be gifted in math, but not in engineering. Okay? And sometimes you can be gifted in one particular area of maths and not another particular area of maths. Okay? So not everyone is gifted. You're not gifted in everything all the time. Okay? And different circumstances will lead you to be gifted or not. So it's about that chance. It's about that motivation. Okay, so you're beginning to see that there's a lot of links. There are a lot of crossovers in this model. Now let's have a quick watch of his little video.
My name is Joseph Renzulli. I'm the director of the NEAG Center for Creativity, Gifted Education, and Talent Development at the University of Connecticut, where I've been doing research and working in schools for almost 50 years. I think that one of my main messages is built around what I call the pedagogy of gifted education. And that's a pedagogy where we look at the interests of young people, their motivation, the kinds of ways that we can support their ideas, their creativity, their energy, and give them maximum opportunities, resources, and encouragement to develop those kinds of things into a process or product or presentation that is their choice, not the teacher's choice or not the school's choice or not the get ready for a test choice. My work is a little bit different from most of the people in gifted education because one of the things that I've tried to do is to apply this pedagogy, this approach to learning, to all students, giving all kids an opportunity to participate in general exploratory experiences that might interest them in a topic that they would then want to follow through on, for all kids to develop things like thinking skills, creativity, learning how to learn skills, various modes of expression, because they might be able to use that in the development of the third type of enrichment, which is really the young person thinking, feeling, and doing like the practicing professional, even if they're doing it at a much more junior level than a filmmaker from Hollywood or a scientist from Harvard or Yale. They're doing what the big guys do. They're just doing it at their own level. And I think the key to this is really what I call the 3 E's. And the first one is enjoyment. Anything that we enjoy doing, we work harder at, we usually do better, we want to revise it, we want to bring it around to a level of perfection because it's a reflection of ourselves. The second thing is engagement. And engagement is kind of hard to identify, but it means we're really into a topic. We really love the topic. We want to spend our own time on it. It is not necessarily a part of a required school assignment. And we can think of other areas like kids that are involved on a sports team, or kids that are in a debate club, or kids that are in band or chorus. These are all things extracurricular that we should try to bring into the curriculum because those kids are highly engaged. And the third thing is enthusiasm for learning. That is the act of learning itself. Finding out new and interesting things is a really exciting process. It's almost like falling in love with someone. We really want to pursue it. We want to do our very best at it. And so I think my best advice to teachers is, first of all, that a teacher himself or herself should develop the 3 E's. If you don't enjoy teaching, you're not going to get engaged. You're not going to enjoy the act of learning. And I think the second thing is to share this kind of interest and enthusiasm with your kids by giving them some choices. And it could be even in a horribly memory-oriented subject that you're getting kids ready to pass your test or a state achievement test. But within any given topic, giving them an opportunity. Let's just take something like studying the Civil War, which all Americans do, American children do many times over. There's so many different aspects of it. There's the music of the Civil War. There's the geography of the Civil War. There's some drama. They might want to watch something like Gone with the Wind. They might want to then make their own little short video. They might want to look at fashions of that period of time, but both men and women. So it's not just memorizing names and dates and generals and battles, but taking a part of it. Look at what Matthew Brady did. He became famous by being really the world's first war photographer. So you might have some kids that are interested in the photography of the period. Those are all the kinds of things that we can even build into a very required, sometimes test prep oriented curricular topic. Make it fun, make it enjoyable, and kids will learn much more efficiently.
Okay, so all about the motivation behind learning, the leadership of learning. Okay, there are a few criticisms about his model. His model was based on adults, predominantly, not on children. And it places a lot of emphasis on this task commitment, this motivation. You heard him talking in the video all about the persistence, the motivation, the engagement. Okay, and the problem with children who are gifted, they're not always motivated. Okay, so finding what makes them tick. Okay, so this combination of creativity and motivation might not work for children who are truly gifted. And also children who are highly intelligent might not actually be in that cutoff for creativity. The higher your IQ, when you get to about 120, those who are highly intelligent are very gifted. Above 120 and the creativity drops off and they're very highly intelligent in their specific academic abilities. Very interesting. Okay, Gagne here. I can never pronounce his name. I always call him Ganges, but maybe it's Gagne. Differentiated between giftedness and talents. Differentiated between giftedness and talents. Giftedness is a natural ability. Okay, it's all about the potential somebody has. Okay, whereas talents, on the other hand, are about performance in a particular ability. So what we mean by this is that you have a natural gift. Your natural ability is reasoning, is inventiveness, imagination. You may be really sort of empathetic, and you might have very good coordination. Those are your natural abilities. But to make them into talents, academic, art, business, social, sport, you've got to have other factors that are involved. Now, we won't watch that video because we're going to run out of time. So influencing factors are things like personality, physical characteristics like motivation, willpower, self-management. We're talking about environmental influences, your physical culture, your teachers, your provisions, the events that are around you, okay, rewards, and also chance. Chance is coming up again, okay. Did you have that table tennis table as a child? Did you have someone to play against? If you didn't, you're not going to be the best, are you? Because you're not going to practice. So it was just chance that you happened to have a table tennis table. Okay? It could be chance that you hurt your knee during an accident on the playing field, and you don't get to develop your natural ability. Okay? So chance plays a very big role in gifted and talented. Okay? A very big role. So he believed that there were 3 of these influences. So giftedness is your natural ability, your intellect, your reasoning, your creativity. And this will turn into a talent if you have the right environment, if you have the right motivations, and if you have the right temperament, the right personality. So 3 things really contributing the natural ability to the performance, the talent. Okay, moving on to Gardner's theory of multiple intelligences. This started off with 7 intelligence. More recently, they've added the naturalistic one. And again, more recently, they've added a spiritual one as well. So it's a lovely little beautiful diagram here. So you have people who are logical, people who are good with languages, interpersonal skills, people who are good at physical coordination, musicians, people who are spiritual, the people who are good at intrapersonal, the good leaders, the spatial awareness, and also the naturalistic people as well. Okay, so lots of different types of intelligence. And you can be good in one area, or you can be good in several areas, okay? It's not just a specific intelligence. I can't remember how long this one is. Let's have a look and see. It's not going to work anyway. Okay, Sternberg. We've heard about him already tonight. Now, he took a very different view from Gardner. Gardner had what ended up as 9 different intelligences. Sternberg has these 3 different types of intelligences. And he defined it as an ability to achieve success in life in terms of personal standards within one's social cultural context, and he named it successful intelligence. Okay, and his 3 intelligence are analytical intelligence, which is all about academic problem solving. Again, we're talking about creativity. And he also put in there a common sense intelligence, people who are very practical. This could be a type of intelligence. And he believed, again, like Tannenbaum, the star model, you've got to have a balance of these intelligences. And on an IQ test, on a test of his type of intelligence, if you scored highly on one intelligence, you had to score highly on the other intelligences. Whereas Gardner's intelligence, you could score highly in the naturalistic, but you didn't necessarily have to be a linguist. Okay? Whereas this, if you score highly on academics, you would also need to score highly on creative and practical as well. So he actually believed that some of Gardner's intelligences were actually better termed as talents. Okay, so there's an argument within themselves is what is giftedness and what isn't, even within their models. The strength of Sternberg is that it's easy to test. The weakness is if you score high on one, you also score high on the others. You can't have that individual intelligence like you can with Gardner's. Okay, so they're the basic models of intelligence. But we're also talking about other types of intelligence as well. EQ. You're psychologists. Hopefully you've got a high EQ. You can understand your own social needs, your own emotions, and the emotions of others. Are you good in social situations? Are you good at reading people? Okay, as psychologists, how many of you get asked, "Can you read my mind?" Yeah, every time. What do you do for a living? I'm a psychologist. Oh my word, I could be a millionaire, okay, if I had a penny for every time somebody had said that. So it's about understanding social situations, but it's also understanding about your emotions and other emotions. And of course, gifted children have problems with this. The higher your IQ, the worse you are at understanding emotions. And is that linked to that autistic spectrum? Maybe it is, maybe it's not. We do know that gifted children have more sensitivities, don't we? They have more social and emotional problems than typically developing children, and we'll talk about that again when we talk about 2E kids. Children who are highly gifted can be slightly more anxious than typically developing children. They can be perfectionists, they can have poor relationships. So the EQ of highly intelligent people is not necessarily there, but people can have an EQ and not necessarily be highly intelligent. Okay. It's a different form of intelligence. So many psychologists accept that there is this emotional intelligence, but it is very difficult to agree on what it actually is. Okay. Children who are highly gifted usually don't understand empathy. They have this strong sense of moral justice, and we talked about this last time when we talked about 2E. It's black and it's white. They have very strong beliefs. They have an amazing imagination. They have these overexcitabilities, this high sensitivity to different sensual stimulus, so noises or clothes and the tags on their clothes and stuff. So they are highly sensitive in that respect. And they respond either very positively or very negatively. Something is either amazing and it's brilliant, or they hate it. Okay, there's no middle ground. So emotional intelligence is amazing in very different respects for EQ as a concept, but also EQ for children who are gifted and talented. Okay, so there are two different concepts within that. Okay, let's just have a look at some controversies, and we'll look at this later in different lectures. So, are we talking about performance or are we talking about potential? Okay, Gagnes differentiate between the two. You have this natural ability and you have your talent. Okay, so the way in which we define giftedness is problematic, and the measure of general intelligence remains controversial. Is it about IQ anymore? Is it about multiple intelligences? Is it about the three intelligences? Is it about a combination of the intelligences? Do we need different concepts to come together? Do they all have to be there at the same time? How much of it is motivation? How much of it is chance as well? Okay, so it's not just about IQ. Gender, the difference between boys and girls, how they get identified, we'll talk about later. The differences in class and ethnicity, I can't speak anymore. Ethnicity, okay? There's that general historical view that boys more than girls get identified as being gifted. The idea that you have to be upper class, those who are in the minorities, those who are not white or of a certain class don't get the funding, don't get the appropriate program, those who are privileged, okay, those who don't look the part. There's also emotional aspects connected with that as well, and the misdiagnosis, okay. A lot of misdiagnosis, the emotional aspects we talk about, the overexcitability. The misdiagnosis, a lot of children who are gifted are misdiagnosed. The lady talked about that in the first YouTube clip. A lot of people are misdiagnosed with mental health disorders, bipolar disorders, okay? A lot of individuals are thought to have ADHD, learning disabilities, or autism, when actually they're just highly intelligent. And a lot of them can become addicted to drugs or alcohol as well, okay? So there are a lot of problems that are associated with identifying children who are gifted and talented, and we'll talk about that more next week. So it is a changing world, and we've talked about we need to identify these children. The models that we've talked about and the way in which the history has evolved in diagnosing identifying children who are gifted and talented has changed greatly since the time of Binet. The great work that Louis Terman has done in studying the gifted and talented, providing us with norms, being able to identify that individuals who have sort of high IQs on that variance of the standard deviation within the standard distribution. The world has changed and education has moved with it, and the models have adapted. But we need these gifted children. We need them to be citizens, to be concerned citizens. We need them to be the leaders. We need them to take control. We need them to motivate others. We need them to identify, to be creative, to be practical, to really push forward their ideas and to get them to be creative to solve our problems. These challenges that the world faces are not going to be solved by just high IQ alone. It's about making these children motivated to understand the problems that are there and to identify them and solve them by being creative. Okay, so let's talk about gifted education within Hong Kong. The idea is that we need to develop the potential so that what I've just said, they can become individuals who are willing to contribute to the community. The present policy within Hong Kong is to educate children within mainstream schools, and a lot of this is done through school-based gifted development programs which meet their educational needs. The EDB recognised that there is also a need, not just about the academics, but also about the social and emotional needs of these children as well. So the aim of gifted education in Hong Kong, it's not mandatory, so it comes back to funding. Okay, and there is different funding depending on what tier school you are in. Okay, a lot of the funding for the T3 schools is by the Hong Kong Gifted and Talented Association. So the mission of gifted education is to explore and develop the potential, so it comes back to potential again, of gifted students by providing them with opportunities within education at their appropriate level of flexible teaching and learning. So it's not necessarily about acceleration, it's more about enrichment. And we'll talk about that when we talk about acceleration, enrichment, and in a couple of weeks. So the level 1 schools, thinking skills, creativity, personal social competence is all done with everybody, okay, within the school curriculum, within the school environment. Differentiated teaching is about grouping different students to their needs, okay, and the enrichment, the broadening of the curriculum happens within the school. Level 2 schools are provided pull-out programs for these children, not necessarily in schools, but for specific groups, okay, homogenous groups. So those children who are particularly creative can go off and do a pull-out program on creativity or leadership or training. Okay. They can also do pull-out programs for specific intellectual abilities, okay, so academics, if you're good at maths, you can get pulled out of the regular classroom and do extra work. So this is all about being in school, and this is all about having pull-out programs. And then you get to the Tier 3 schools, and it's different. Those children who are identified as gifted within Tier 3 schools can have very much more accelerated programs, pull-out programs that are funded by more by NGOs. Oh, it's all flashing. How exciting. Okay, and this just sets it out for you, okay? It's quite interesting, really. So the Hong Kong Academy of Gifted Education does a lot with the Tier 3 schools to do with funding, okay? Whereas this is just all about gifted education support within the school. So it's very different depending on what level you are, and again, it's all about the funding. So the government within 2010-2011 spent 52 billion on education, and within that they spent another sort of 29 million on gifted education. And since 2007, they've also spent an extra 24 billion per year on gifted education. So it's something that they are really quite interested in, and they have the funds. You're one of the only governments in the world who actually has money. Yeah, the UK has no money at all. Okay, let's do some discussion time. We've got a good half an hour. What I'd like you to do is split up into groups. I have some pens and some pencils and some pieces of paper. I want you to look at the similarities and the differences within Gardner's, Sternberg's and Renzulli's model, okay? So are we talking about a general factor of intelligence? Are there multiple intelligences? What are the similarities between their definition of intelligence? And what are the differences? Are the models based on children? Are the models based on adults? Okay. I'm falling over. Are we looking at the similarities of broad definitions or specific definitions? So have a piece of paper and see what you can come up with. Again, this is one of your essay questions, so you can make it count. I've only got 6 different pieces of paper, so if you've got other pieces